Perfect. Well, it might be helpful if you can just give like a little quick 60-second spiel on like what it is that you do right now.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I could do it in 60 seconds, but I'll try.
As long as you need.
But right now, from a professional standpoint, I am the head of marketing for lead brands and partnerships for Diageo Canada. Diageo is one of the largest bev alcohol distributors here in this country, but we're a global organization, and I've been with the company for almost 3 years. So we can get into a little bit of my career journey, as I think it definitely can bode well to the themes and topics of these podcasts and your podcast overall. But yeah, it has been a wild ride jumping into a brand new industry that I knew nothing about, and yet again, I was hit with imposter syndrome. So that's where I currently am.
That's good. That kind of fits with our theme of things. But we do like to start things off with a little bit of rapid fire, to get things going. So easy questions, whatever comes to mind. So first one, do you have a favorite movie? You can also say like top 3 because stuff. Oh, Clueless?
Yeah. I think it was like, defining for the eras, fashion. Now I have a 10-year-old daughter who's now obsessed with it. So, and Paul Rudd is also on my top 3 list. I do have
I think that's the quickest answer we've gotten for a movie. Usually no one can pick one and they have like, oh, I want to do top 3 instead. But that was very decisive.
Sorry, what was the second one you said?
No, I said Paul Rudd.
Paul Rudd.
With my husband, he's on my list. I get a hall pass with him.
Paul Rudd. Is he in Clueless?
He's the brother. He's Josh.
Oh yeah, I have not seen Clueless, so
You love fashion, yes? You're into fashion?
Yes, yeah. I've never like.
Steven's been LARPing this whole time. He does not actually.
No, I didn't know.
I feel like that's how it all sort of began. You need to go watch Clueless. I don't know what your plans are tonight. Cancel them and go watch.
Yeah. I mean, I'm more just. I think Paul Rudd is the more surprising answer, but I guess that makes sense. He's aged very well. He looks
very well. Yeah.
He looks the same age as he always has. But okay, so that's a good answer. Our next question was, what is your hall pass in your marriage? But so you answered, no, I'm kidding.
That's a whole different podcast.
You answered that. Yeah. What is your favorite book, if you have one?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I'm looking because I have I would say The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, only because I worked in television for so many years. And just knowing it was very old Hollywood glam. I love the entertainment industry. And this woman just living fearlessly. So I would say, that would be my book.
And that's a fiction book? I've never even heard of it before.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Like historical drama novel.
Exactly.
Okay. Is there a podcast that you would recommend that you're into? I don't know if you listen to podcasts.
Not Quite Ready?
Perfect. That's the only answer. Yeah. Okay.
I listen to podcasts almost too much. Actually, it's my preference and go to in the car. So yeah, outside of Not Quite Ready, I would say it's a tie between Smartless. And
Smartless is the one with Jason Bateman and Will in it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And oh my goodness, how am I forgetting the other Sean Hayes from Will and Grace, which was again a staple in university. So I just love the banter between the 3 of them. But I've recently got hooked on Diary of a CEO.
Oh yes, yeah. Yes, those are good ones. Yes, I've been told that Brad Pitt was on Smartless recently, right? Am I?
Oh, I did not know.
I might be confusing with the Armchair Expert one, but anyways, I've had multiple people tell me that you have to watch the video of that podcast. It's just
Brad Pitt?
Yeah.
Okay. I literally want to go onto my phone right now to look, but I won't.
Yeah. So that's my hall pass answer, Taylor. No. If you could travel anywhere in the world right now for vacation, where would you go?
Italy.
Italy? I guess that makes sense. Where in Italy?
Heritage. I think I'd love to see where my parents and my grandparents grew up. And I think to be able to bring my children now who are 16 and 10 there to experience more of the culture, I would. Yeah, I would get on a plane tonight.
Yes, that's a good one. And last question, what is your favorite restaurant you've ever been to? Or favorite meal?
Oh, God. That is a really, really hard.
Yeah, I don't think I would also have an answer to that. So it is a tough one.
Yeah. Like we are big into like eating at home. I would say Nobu in Toronto. We went
Oh yeah.
last for TIFF was a really cool experience. Yeah,
Yes.
really, yeah. But honestly, I would probably say my grandmother's kitchen.
Yes.
Really
Okay.
had to. Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. Awesome. Well, that's the rapid fire. So you passed the.
Okay, good. Now
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get to the whole podcast.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Awesome. Well, yeah, no, I know you gave a little bit of context as to what you're doing right now, but I think it'd be helpful to just kind of understand like a little bit of your career. So, as far as I understand, you're a lifelong marketer, and that's obviously what you're in right now. So, did you have anyone in your family that was like in business, in marketing, had a corporate career that you kind of looked to that kind of guided you down this path?
Okay, so I love to talk, so I'll try and do this as
Yeah, that's
simple
perfect.
as possible.
Yeah.
Just for a podcast, that actually helps. I was actually raised in a really small town, about 2.5 hours north of Toronto, in a town called Beaverton. And at that time, there's probably about 2,000 people. And my parents actually followed my grandparents there because my grandfather went there to develop the town, right? Building the local plaza, the little motel. And so in terms of my influence and upbringing, my dad was a painter. My mom was a child's clothing store owner, and then eventually became the administrator, like the secretary at the local school that I went to. But I was surrounded by people that had a lot of hustle and had a lot of heart for things that they did. But the one thing that we did as a family, and I don't know why, but we always sat down to watch Young and the Restless.
Okay.
And I know this sounds wild, but I always was watching that show with them from 4:30 to 5:30, and then it was dinner time right after. And I always had this vision of like, when I grow up, I want to work at Newman Enterprises. And so like Newman, like Victor Newman, I don't know if you know about Young and the Restless, but it's a whole family affair. And they're like business, marketing, everything, so they did a lot of like fragrance and cosmetics. But it was always just this idea of the allure of like being in business. So when I actually finally got out of the small town to go to university at Laurier, where we met a mutual friend, I did not know that that is what I was going to do. Throughout high school, I had worked on the police boats with the OPP. I had pumped gas at boats. I had worked at a convenience store. I had been a waitress. Like I went in saying, I just want to get out of this small town and I just want to go live in the big city, which ended up being Waterloo, Ontario, which, Taylor, if you haven't been, it is probably half the size of Calgary. So like not at all like a big city in comparison to Toronto, actually probably smaller than half of Calgary. And so I took an arts degree and wanted to do it with a business option. And then first semester of first year, I failed economics. And so that was a real big slap in the face to be like, maybe I'm not meant to do this. So, you know how these things go, right? It's like you have this notion and idea of you're going to do this big, fabulous, fun life. And again, like with the group of friends I had, all of them were in business. Yeah. So it was like totally like this FOMO, like, oh my God, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. But I graduated with an honors double major in communications and sociology and decided I had no idea what I was going to do with my life and went and moved in with my sister in Barrie and figured like, most people that don't know what they're going to do, they go back and they enroll in school. So I went and did a post-grad degree or diploma in broadcast journalism, thinking that like, I love talking to people. I like to talk, like what better career choice than to like interact with people. I had this notion of like, I am a natural nurturer. I really love helping people, connecting people to news, et cetera, as a way to like, give them information in my own mind, right? I like justify why it would be the right career path for me. And so once I landed sort of my first job, reporting for a small station, I did some, public broadcast stuff. I landed at one of these places called Casino Gaming Television. And it just so happened that in order to pay a very expensive rent bill in Toronto, I needed more than just this little job. So they were hiring for a marketing coordinator. So I could do like my on-air stuff at night, but I needed a day job to like actually pay my bills because my credit cards were maxed and I couldn't pay my car payment anymore. Like on my visa, I was like, okay, I need to like shape up, or like I'm not going to be able to stay in the city. And I just wanted to stay because I finally made it to Toronto. And so that's how I fell into marketing, if you can believe it. And working for networks, into television, it was World Fishing Network, WFN. That was actually what got me my first trip out west to both Vancouver and Calgary to do fishing shows, because we had like Bob Azumi, if you guys know who that is. You might be too young to know, but like the professional fisherman was one of our guys. And then this other network, Gold TV, which no longer exists, but all about soccer. And so brought the soccer great Pele to Toronto as part of that, which was a massive career highlight. And then Casino Gaming Television. And after being with them for a year and a half, I was like, oh, like I'm pretty good at this marketing stuff, right? Like, again, when you think about what at the core marketing is, it really is being able to communicate to people, right? Your product offering, your service, etc. And so I applied for a job at Global Television, which I landed the coordinator role. And I ended up then spending 12 years of my career there. And I grew from coordinator to associate brand manager to manager and director over the course of those 12 years. And just had an incredible ride, living and breathing, launching shows that I had grown up watching myself. And back to the whole Young and the Restless, Global was the network that always aired Young and the Restless. So it always felt like a full circle moment for me, you know?
So it seemed like you were trying to do like you're on, like, I think that seems like a more interesting, like exciting job. You're on TV, and then you kind of, the marketing sort of just happened, and then you started to like it more. Is that kind of how the journey went? Yeah.
I think liking it more and recognizing that the ability to influence. I always have looked at marketing, and I had a really good leader, Barb Williams, who now heads up the CBC, always teach us that it is such a privilege to go into people's homes every single day. And it was just, and we were taught always to never take that for granted. And I think, the ability to, when you think of our most precious resource is our time, is our attention, and to be able to create work that either inspires or excites or delights or has some sort of emotional benefit for other people, that was sort of how I really rationalized and justified that, like, oh, like this is still following my passion because I still get to have this interaction every single day. So that's still the way that I look at the craft. No,
it's really interesting. I just want to like touch on something and see if you could dig into it a bit more. So like something that I think it sounds like you experience and a lot of people do is they start with an idea of where they're going. They get along, maybe they either find it doesn't fit them as well, or maybe there's not even opportunities in the marketplace, and then they find something else and they start to, first you got to identify the opportunity and recognize that this is where I want to put effort in. Could you maybe just talk about, like, it sounds like you rose through the ranks at Global there, and what was the kind of personality traits or the strategies you used to help you sort of excel in that area, and then something that maybe you weren't really planning to do?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because you're right. Like, I wasn't classically trained in this. And I'll tell you, it has been reminded of me now in a CPG environment that I'm in now, of some of the fundamentals and principles, right? But I will say that work ethic, and that's why I brought up sort of where I came from and my past and the individuals and the role models that I had in my life. I think that was my differentiator. I think hustling and working hard and not being scared to do things that I didn't necessarily have the answer to actually ended up making me different from everybody else, because I wasn't scared to try the thing that hadn't been done, right? Like, I was part of, the Canadian media industry when Netflix completely turned our worlds upside down, right? And I still remember being in meetings where I was like, no, we need to say set your PVR, which I know seems so antiquated right now because you're like, what is even a PVR? They don't even exist. But and pushing the envelope, always having this consumer centric mindset, always thinking about what is best for the other person that's receiving this message, right? And I think it's, not being scared, not getting in our own way, and also really working hard, right? And I think now it's such a different time and place and space for young people entering in, because I think they're so easily influenced by needing to have all the answers. And sometimes it's not to get too philosophical, but it's in not having the answer is where like you can find it, right? Of like this idea of like, I firmly believe, because of my faith as well, like you're always exactly where you're meant to be, even if it feels like it's off the path right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting, you touched on something, is like people now are dealing with, there's more opportunity than ever, but there's also more chaos and uncertainty, and it feels in some ways probably more stressful, because you can't just, I'm going to go to university, jump through these hoops, complete this certificate, and then start my job that I stay in for 10 or 20 years. It's very much, you got to kind of figure it out as you go.
Right.
You mentioned something interesting, the Netflix scenario of kind of throwing your industry upside down, and you maybe had some insights that maybe your background being different enabled you to look at it a different way. Could you maybe like talk a little bit about like, it sounds like you were thinking about through like, what's the end customer actually needing and wanting, and what problem are we solving? Like, what sort of, that sounds like a very uncertain time for an industry, but it sounds like you maybe had some kind of approaches that worked well for you. Could you maybe talk a bit about something you learned there?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And it's something now, actually, as I'm, faced in a new industry with new challenges, that I think being able to not take no for an answer. And I think that can be a little bit polarizing sometimes because, we're taught, kind of stay in line, follow the hierarchy. And I'm not promoting being unprofessional. What I am, though, promoting is there is always a way to get to where you want to be. And I think what's beautiful about being a marketer, and especially starting my career in television, where telling stories is at the heart, right, of film, of television, of TV, and being able to tell the story that you want, the narrative that you want, and going at problems with solution mindset, right? Because it's so easy to just accept the status quo. It's so easy to just accept the no that you're told and say, okay, I'll just, do something else or not do it at all. And I think it takes a lot of bravado and a lot of courage to be able to say, you know what, there's a reason that I believe in this. And especially when you have that little twinge or that instinct feeling, and this is why now I really pride myself as a leader of when I see that spark in my team's eyes of the things that they want to do, I try and double click on it to understand what is driving it, what's that motivation. And because really I want to be the type of leader that inspires people to do their best work, because then when you unlock that, that's when the magic happens. That's when you get the big ideas. That's when you get the things that are going to completely change an industry. I think sometimes when we work too much in constraints and confinements, even though, when it comes to budgetary, et cetera, it could actually spark a lot of creativity. But I think when you work in a space and place with people that you feel like you can't be yourself with, and you can't say the crazy thing out loud, it continues just a cycle of potentially repetitive behavior or cultural nuances that doesn't really breed, the best work out of people. So yeah. A very long-winded way of answering your question.
Yeah. No, I think Taylor and I talk about this all the time too, that like Taylor went to law school, I did business school and things like that. And it like, sometimes I find it almost teaches the opposite of the skills you need to like go and create and relate to people and create and like start a business or anything like that. So it sounds like what you're saying, we've definitely had conversations on. But one question I was wondering, because it sounds like you worked a lot of random jobs when you were like younger. You said gas station, all these things. So And I think that's something that's like, now it definitely seems like, at least what I see with like friends and my nephews and stuff like that, is that it's getting, it's so competitive to get into university now that like kids like honestly don't even have time to like work a part-time job. It's like you have like tutors and studying, and it's totally different. So how do you think like those different experiences, pumping gas, being a waitress, sort of impacted your career when you got into marketing and you were at these senior levels, making these big time decisions? Just kind of curious your thoughts on that, and if you've seen sort of a trend, and maybe it's like a skill set that you have that maybe like later generations won't.
That's a really good question. And because I'm raising a 16-year-old son right now in this exact world, Stephen, of like, I have this, I have that. I do think when you have varied experiences and have to start at the bottom, it teaches you basic skills of how to talk to people, how to ask for things, how to arrive on time, how to manage expectations. And it's interesting because my son this summer was faced with getting his first part-time job as a camp counselor, and he didn't want to do it because he's a pretty intense runner, and wants to continue down that track. And I'm so grateful that sort of we got him to get in and take that job, because I think that there are some just baseline soft skills that, you're right, the classroom doesn't teach you. Business school, law school, it doesn't teach you the same things as being able to understand when somebody has a bad day. Maybe I'm not going to go in and ask them today for that race, right? Like you understand really the nuance. And that's why, as I look back now on my education in sociology, which really is the study of people, right, and interactions in a lot of ways, this is now exactly what I'm doing in my career in terms of how is it then best to talk to people, right? What are the environments, the media choices? What is the message? How are we showing up? What is the tone? All of those things that you realize that like you need to actually be really good observer of humans and behavior to be able to communicate to them in an effective way. So I would say a lot of those random weird jobs ended up just allowing me to do things on time, be able to do a lot of things and talk to people. And it's funny because I'm sure you guys probably talk a lot about the impact of AI and what does this mean for all of us, right? All of our career paths, right? And I actually do think the ability to have good human connection still is going to be, and those relationship building skills is actually going to be a one-off and a superpower, right? That our the younger generation, because they're behind the screens all the time, actually don't know how to foster.
Yes. Yeah, I remember hearing that like Facebook wants to introduce like AI friends to like cure loneliness. You're like, this is not like the solution we should be looking at, but
Right.
yeah, very bizarre.
But that is a reality that's in front of, right, this next generation.
Yeah. So you obviously worked in entertainment for a while. Sounds like you were in marketing there, and you moved up the ranks, and then you moved to TikTok. So how did that come about?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. And being 12 years in a career somewhere, growing up, right? I had started there at 23, if I'm doing the math right. I think so. I am doing the math right. I was really scared in terms of, and I'm going to use scared. I know it's a big word, but I'm going to use it. I had been in an industry that, to what we were saying, Taylor, right, was being massively disrupted. And I was actually thinking about how am I going to future-proof myself as a marketer? Because, I'm now saying to myself, okay, I see the Canadian media landscape getting smaller and smaller. And are my skills going to be transferable outward? And then COVID happened, right? And so raising two kids, homeschooling, you start to obviously see the world very differently as you're like, how am I just going to get them through JK? Where am I getting my food? Am I washing my cans properly? All that craziness that happened. And then unfortunately, two major personal things happened that year. My sister got diagnosed with cancer, and Tanya and I lost a very dear friend from university to cancer. And it was in the sadness and in the grief and in all of the pain that I said to myself, what am I so scared of? I get the privilege of getting to live this life and I'm scared of changing a job, right? Like people around me were, fighting for their lives. We were in this weird pandemic where we didn't even know what tomorrow could bring. And so I was like, I'm done. I just like, it was almost like I had this permission to be like, just let the fear go. And I applied for the role at TikTok. And I remember applying for a few different roles, and I heard back from them within 2 days of applying. And at that point in 2020, I was going to say I started talking to them in about June 2020. It was just starting to just really fire on all cylinders, right? And as I went through like grueling 6 rounds of interviews with them, and the whole Trump administration was, there's more antics and conversations about the app. I remember the night before starting, it was when our CEO was on 60 Minutes. And I literally was like, did I just make the worst mistake of my life, right? I'm leaving an industry. Remember, I love entertainment. I love TV, right? Like I now am Victoria Newman from Newman Enterprises and Young and the Restless. What am I doing, right? And I'm leaving. Oh my, now that they've become good friends. I've had my babies with them. Like, it was such a family. And I am so happy now looking back over the 2.5 years that I was at TikTok. It was the most exhilarating, exhausting, emotionally, like I can't even tell you the roller coaster that it was. I'm so grateful for all of the hard experiences that came out of that. I am so grateful because it made me so much stronger and faster and better as a marketer. And without that, I wouldn't have landed where I am today. And so I think the lesson is like, you face the fear and you do it anyway, because even in the hard moments when you're trying something new, and imposter syndrome was real. Like I started as marketing employee number 1, I think 8 for the total company here in Canada, challenged to build the marketing team from the ground up on both the consumer and business marketing side. But I'm surrounded by people, ex-Meta, Google, Shopify, like all the most brilliant brains. And that got to me because I was like, who's this little girl from Beaverton, Ontario that's worked in media promoting Survivor for 28 seasons? Like, what do I have to offer? Right. And so it's funny that, when I asked the GM, probably about a month into starting, and he said, you know how to talk to Canadians. Don't devalue the fact that, from Alberta to Quebec to Ontario, Canadians are all very different. And you've been able to successfully talk to them over the 12 years that you've been in media. And that is something that I had never even thought as my skill set, right? And so I think it's really important that when you think of your skill set, of your work experiences, of your personal experiences, how can those transfer into other industries, other areas that you wouldn't even see it? And sometimes I think it's important to ask people for their opinion and context on the role that you do, so that you can see it through a different lens, because you only see it through the grit of the day-to-day that you're in.
It's a really good point that I think, I don't know, to have success, you really have to play to some extent, like what it is that you're good at, but it's hard to figure it out like on your own, because sometimes you think it's one thing, and maybe you thought it was like certain marketing skills you had or something, but then it's maybe as simple as like you know how to talk to Canadians. And so and that can almost help with like starting a business or something. It's like, well, what is it that like I can do that perhaps other people cannot?
That's right. That's right. And it was in talking to Canadians every single day, that was one of the most mundane parts of the job that I didn't realize was the most valuable in this instance, right? In terms of needing to build a brand from the ground up, needing to build it as a trusted brand amongst Canadians, right? I didn't realize that the thing that I did in my job that came so easy to me and wasn't the sexiest or the biggest was the thing that was the most valuable. And so I would say when we look at our careers and we look at our current jobs and wanting to make a transition or a jump, look at, the status document that you build for your team meeting every week and do a double click on like what that represents, right? That's some strategic forecasting ability. That is looking from a time management or project management standpoint, that is a prioritization utilization meeting. Like, and then you can really look beyond, because I think sometimes we end up being our own worst enemies and we limit ourselves, right? We looked at those LinkedIn posts and we say, oh my God, 100 people applied. And then you get those analytics that say this person is VP level or this person is manager level. And you're like, I can't possibly compete. I would say apply anyway, because sometimes your magic is in what you don't necessarily see.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You also mentioned that obviously some tough events happen, and that also kind of like released you to take a risk. And that seems to be a common theme that we see as well from people we talk to, is whether it's a layoff or just some change in their life that was difficult actually is an opportunity to help you take the next step. And it was very interesting to see. That's how I kind of, the impression I got from you is that sort of opened you up to take a leap.
Yeah, totally. And I think I've actually had the privilege to have an incredible human, the CMO of North America, Ed Pilkington, be my leader for the first 2 years here at Diageo. And what's been inspiring about what we're talking about and that subject matter right now, his philosophy is being open to the possibilities. And I think embracing that in absolutely now everything that I do. And sometimes it is releasing and stepping into that fear and doing it anyways, to be like, what is actually the worst that can happen? Right? What is the worst that you get a job you don't like? Okay, then you go find another one. I think when you have these challenges and you overcome them, and the scariest thing happens to you and you're faced with that, whether it is a death or losing of a job or whatnot, once you realize that you are resilient and you can get over and through it, you say to yourself, I have nothing to lose, really, and so even yesterday, amongst the chaos that is happening in my world right now because of, disruptions happening in the elk industry, I chose to stop and take the day off and celebrate my son's 16th birthday, right? Like, these are the moments that we also need to just actually make sure that we're still living life. And I think because of how scarce our lives seem at large right now, in terms of, oh, well, you have a job, you better, be grateful that you have one. And I still think it's important that we recognize that we need to still celebrate life and really keep ourselves open to the possibilities without losing the essence of who we are. Too, because I think a lot of the time we end up selling ourselves in as our careers, as our sole identity, and that can also be wearing over time, right? Because there's so much more.
Yeah, and do you remember during that time of like transition and kind of where you had permission to go take a risk? Like, was there anything that's, because it's easy to be like you get inspiration to do something and you feel motivated, but then it kind of like fades and it goes up and down. And like, was there something that like you kind of like told yourself or that helped you like, stay the path? Because again, it's like trying to start like a workout plan. It's like you might be motivated like day one, and then as time goes on, you kind of lose motivation. You got to like keep that discipline. So was there anything that helped you during that period?
I would say having being a parent has been a very good lesson in terms of like just living in, because there is this sort of roller coaster that happens. I think the important thing for me has always been to remind myself on why I'm here in the first place. Because you can get really caught up in the details or the bureaucracy or the drama or politics of it all. But like when I step back on my hard days, which I had one of them earlier this week, I was like, first of all, why am I feeling this way? Okay, feel valid that I feel that way. And then why am I here in the first place? And just like go back to the very baseline of like, what is my personal purpose, right? Like, what is my purpose? And because I think as humans and as, young individuals, you're like, okay, we want to change the world. Like, we need to make it a better place. But, I think going through the exercise, which I've done over the last couple of years, just from a professional and personal development standpoint, is like defining my purpose. And I was able to define my purpose by just talking to people, which was part of the initial exercise, and recognizing or realizing that what, again, my purpose was the thing that came natural to me, which was I like talking to people and I actually really like connecting people. And so, I've sort of synthesized my purpose of like, wanting to connect people with a greater purpose of like, ensuring that like they're being the best that they can be, or like I'm being the best that I can be. And I think on the hard days, that's what I do, Stephen. I remind myself like, am I being the best version of myself? Am I doing what I know brings me the most joy? Okay, I'm not. What are some of the things that I can now do to get back to that place so I can feel good again? Right. So it's like small, like I do really believe in like the whole idea of atomic habits and like just that 1%, like how can I just do a little bit of something differently so that I can get back to that happy place? Because I do think it's so easy to sit in a lot of the negative that happens both personally and professionally. And it's like, how can you find the silver lining? And I think it goes a little bit back to what I was saying earlier about not taking no for an answer. Like, how can I get you to say yes? Right. I do just have a naturally optimistic demeanor. Why I married a pessimist is beyond me. But it's funny because it's like I'm always trying to convince him to go on that trip or convince him to do the house reno. But I realize that's kind of what is my superpower in a lot of ways. That's my weird.
So do you even stay optimistic in January and February in Toronto when it's just gray and it's like, I might need some of their optimism.
You might need some of it, yeah.
Yeah.
No. And listen, I definitely do not always stay in that place. It does come naturally to me, but I recognize too that I don't want to be toxically positive in environments and situations that warrant that positivity. So I definitely am a big proponent of feeling all the feels, good and bad. But I actually think that it's a lot easier to stay in the negative. I think it is actually way more work and harder to be positive and look at the bright side and be hopeful and find a way out of things. I think that that's the way that maybe I push myself.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's easy to just look at things negatively. So
exactly. But I feel like now I really talked myself around your question versus like answering your question directly.
No, I think you did. I don't even remember what it was. So I think you answered.
Okay.
So related to this, we also talked about like imposter syndrome. You've taken a lot of really big leaps over the years into areas that maybe weren't in your traditional wheelhouse. You talked about like finding talking to people to figure out like, oh, like talking to Canadians and that skill set of understanding Canadians really well is one of my skill sets for the TikTok team. Was there anything else? Because I can imagine like you, first of all, short form video is TikTok's specialty. That's a whole new technology. That's a whole new space with a lot of nuance and I can't remember the year, but I think it was kind of just gaining popularity post-COVID. So it would have still been a very new space. Like, how did you overcome this imposter syndrome? And was it like learning how, like reading up on the side and talking to people? Like, what were the sort of techniques? Because I think this is something that really holds people back is they're like, they get into something and then, oh, I'm overwhelmed. I don't even know how to like take the next step. I'm just stuck.
Yeah. And honestly, I will be really, really transparent with you both. It was really hard. And I got to a place that I was measuring my weeks and how many days I didn't cry. And I'm being really honest. And it was, remember once I left, my husband was so relieved because it was real. It was real. And I think there isn't getting any over it. If I'm being honest, I think it is going through it. I think the reality is imposter syndrome, rightfully or wrongfully, is our own selves getting in our own way, right? And having that self-doubt and not truly believing that we are equals to folks, right? And I think now as I stepped into a new role in a new industry, that is that lesson that I took, is that, and I'll tell you a few interesting anecdotes along the way, is like, because I was told, you're at TikTok, you're too nice, you're too Canadian, own your chair, right? Like those, right? So it just like continued to like where, you would think, okay, like I'm getting the permission to be stronger, to be tougher, to whatnot. I then realize that like, oh, it actually knocked me down a few, because I was like, oh, the way that I am is still not even good enough, right? Even, and I went in thinking that I would let the work speak for itself and all of, the great work. But, I think it was, really taking the time that I should have to build the relationships that I needed to, because I let my imposter syndrome get in the way of that. And what I should have done is find my allegiances and my allies and utilize their expertise and their brilliance to learn versus trying to do it all on my own, right? It's almost like I had too much pride versus admitting defeat sometimes, right? To say, actually, I don't know how to do that. Can you help me?
Yeah, I think sometimes too with imposter syndrome is that like I think it's very natural that you go to that frame of mind because you're like, oh, I feel a little inadequate. Like you almost double down on not wanting to like show any inadequacy. So you're like, well, I'm not gonna like talk to someone and ask for help because then it
That's
only
right.
like will double it. So yeah, it's almost like this a little bit of like vicious cycle.
It's a vicious cycle, right? Or like, I would always say to myself, don't say something in a meeting like unless it's adding value. No. If you have a random thought, say something in a meeting, because sadly or not, perception is reality, right? And that quiet girl in the corner, even though she was taking in and listening and learning and then go crafting strategy, my silence actually didn't always bode well in terms of what the perception of me and my leadership was, right? So then I had to dig myself out of that.
Yes.
So
yeah.
But before we go on to your time at Diageo, I am very curious. What is it that makes Canadians different? Like you mentioned, talking to Canadians, and they're very different between provinces, let alone between other parts of the world. Like what is it that makes, I guess, telling stories or selling products or communicating and building communities with Canadians a little bit different that maybe would be unexpected?
Oh, I love that you asked this question, because this is something I'm really passionate about. I believe it's Canada to the world, right? This notion of exportability. When you think of us as Canadians, we are the most educated, the most diverse. We are truly a test bed for so much incredible industry. I think we were hearing this week a lot of, I don't know if it was Mark Carney, or I'm thinking of, I'm forgetting the politician's name, talking about AI and the fact that like Canada has been like the homegrown space for AI and how we need to continue to invest in this. So I think as Canadians, we sometimes underpin or undervalue the bravado or the gravitas that we have and the impact that we have on the world. And so I'm just a huge proponent of that. Even now working in a global multinational, it is, hey, Canada will try that. Hey, can we get in on that? And like, I think, again, not letting fear get in the way has actually been really helpful to say, no, let us do things that haven't been done before. Because Canadians have such, we're so sophisticated and so highly educated that you can do things that necessarily you can't do in other parts of the world. I also think our European sensibilities actually that's the biggest difference between, I think, being in an organization now where we're partnered or sistered with the US, is that we care about things differently. We think about things differently. We consume things differently. And so, I think it's really important to make sure that when you're working with big organizations, still having that Canadian lens and that Canadian, what we call like fit for purpose work, is really important. And the best was like at Global, comedy would hit different. The way that we would actually schedule comedy versus drama, let's say in Alberta versus Quebec versus Ontario, different times a day, depending on the genre of programming, would hit in different ways. So in Alberta, they don't love comedy. It doesn't hit the same way that it does in the East, right? And so it was like, okay, for our prime time slot, but you don't realize that, like learning and seeing that, it actually tells you a lot about that consumer segment. Right. And then what are then the shows that I'm going to go talk to? What are the products and what's the emotional benefit that I'm going to communicate does change, because Canadian sensibilities change as you look province to province.
Yeah. No, I think your point about like we're very educated is like sometimes I wonder if we're like too educated because we always like our rates of like entrepreneurship and stuff are very low relative to like our education levels. And I think that was sort of like a bit of Taylor and I's inspiration behind starting this is like, just I don't know if helping get a conversation going on it's like, yeah, like we actually can take risks and like speak up and try something new. Cause like my day job is in finance, and what I've been told often, because I have a lot of colleagues who go to New York and stuff, and they say like a B plus candidate in Toronto is like an A plus in New York because it's just very competitive. We're very educated here, so it's I think that's one thing that we want to help is like, yeah, like it's okay to like take risks and take shots because it's just like not our culture.
It's not our culture, right? And I think we are too polite for our own good sometimes, and we are too apologetic, and that's why one of the campaigns that we launched around TIFF at TikTok, it was, I think, my second year there, was the Unapologetic campaign. And it was like this rally cry to Canadians. Because what is still great about the platform is this, you show this raw, authentic self. Like, let's show Canadians what Canadians are really like, right? And they are risk takers, and they are, and I think that we sort of force ourselves to be the certain way, to your point on entrepreneurship, right? Like, we're almost forced because of how competitive it is here to be like, oh, I better go do this or I better go do that, versus taking a chance and betting on ourselves sometimes, right? But that's why I think it's really important to remind ourselves of like, okay, you are any one of us, we quit our day job and we decide to go follow our dreams and our passions. What's really the worst that's going to happen? Right? Like, yeah, it might be hard. Yeah, we might have to go, sling it, doing a few side jobs to pay the mortgage or the rent, but like, we're going to be okay. Right? Like, at the end of the day. And I think we always just go to like the worst possible place that we can go to. But yeah, I'd say, I'm so happy. And obviously hindsight is 2020, that, I keep pushing myself into new territories that I haven't been in, because now what I'm recognizing, even though it was never part of the plan, that it's actually making me such a well-rounded business professional, even though it was unintentional. Right. And so back to the conversation earlier about like, when we're young, we think we have to have it all figured out. And I don't think we do. I think, you guys know in the backgrounds that you are in, it's sometimes, again, in that unknown where we've gotten to these great places, like the two of you starting this podcast, right? That was never part of the roadmap. That was never part of the, hey, you got to go do this to be successful. And so I think what we need to do is, be mindful of that and tell our stories so that other people can just, recognize that we all go through this, and then just keep doing it. Like, just keep doing the things we want to do and put fear to the side, because I think it sometimes can be our greatest barrier. But if we really just ask ourselves the question, what's the worst that can happen, and start worrying about what the best things that can happen, like, I think it's just going to change the drive and the motivation of those wannabe entrepreneurs that are too scared to take that leap, right?
Totally.
Yeah, we're coming up on time, so we did get a ton of time to talk about your latest role. But you've mentioned something really interesting about the importance of storytelling, human relationships. How are you doing that in your current role? I can imagine, like, I know we've seen like Gen Z is not drinking alcohol as much, and that seems like a pretty important part of the current place you're at. Could you maybe just talk about like learning storytelling, learning how to tell stories that people could maybe apply to their own journeys?
No, totally. And yeah, that's why it's interesting, because I look at parallels between my careers, that I keep going to industries that are being disrupted. And maybe, again, my sort of fearlessness that I've, been able to grow into has maybe helped me not be as scared to do things while there's sometimes mayhem and chaos happening. But I would say what I love about Diageo is their mission is to celebrate life every day, everywhere. And the reality is that, in a Bev Elk company like Diageo, it's all about drinking less but better, in the sense of, we look at the celebration occasions. We look at the occasions of, you guys getting together and have a beer after not being together for a long time, a great pint of Guinness. We look at, I just got a promotion at a job and I'm going to go out and celebrate with my friends at a club. And that's where the storytelling comes in, right? It's all about occasion-based and consumer-centric marketing to really connect, again, that emotional benefit, not of the alcohol per se, but of that connection together. And that's why a lot of our campaigns, whether it's Captain Morgan, all about getting your crew together, IRL, or Smirnoff in terms of inclusive joy, is really all about that connection and that moment that our brands bring people together ultimately at. So I think that's where you see sort of the red thread of the story or of the storytelling, i.e. literally in my first career chapter in terms of telling the stories of television characters, then to telling the stories of everyday Canadians in terms of the raw, authentic joy, which, you know, TikTok's mission was to inspire creativity and bring joy. And now to Diageo's, which is, you know, celebrate every day, everywhere. Again, I tie that back to my purpose in terms of wanting to be the connection, wanting to, you know, make the world a better place and bring people together. It sort of all fits in. But yeah, it doesn't come without its challenges for sure. And I think it's, again, staying really motivated on, we have the most recognizable and trusted brands within the category. And how do we continue to tell the really important stories of these brands and what they do for consumers that enjoy them responsibly?
So for someone who's trying to learn, maybe for their own, maybe it's their own personal career or their own business, I want to learn how to tell better stories. It sounds like a big aspect is you first have to learn what the story is you're telling. You have to talk to people and then make that connection. But I imagine there's also an element of like, this is where you envision the brand where you want it to go, and you kind of want to also persuade. So it's a two-way conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I'm kind of hearing it. Is that like, how would someone go about learning? Yeah. How do I tell a better story for what I'm doing in my personal life?
Yeah. So I always look at it as like this double bubble of like, from a marketing perspective, and you have to have like, you know, that Venn diagram, the brand truth and the consumer truth, right? And I'd say for your personal journey, it's the same thing, right? It's like, what is your brand truth? What's the human truth, right? And so how do you make sure that you are recognizing that, first of all, you aren't the consumer, right? I am not the consumer. And so I actually have to pull away my own thoughts, feelings, judgment, consumption habits, because I am not the consumer. And so what is it that the consumer needs, wants, and how can I tell that story, right? That's what leads me to what my strategy is, right? Letting the data and the insights tell me where I need to go in future. And I think that's hard to do, right? Because you need to make sure you have the right infrastructure in place and the right teams to be able to do that. But I would say, back to your own personal story, you know, I got the insights and the data points from my dearest friends who would say, Nadia, you're always hooking me up with people. You're always introducing me to people, right? Like, that's where I was like, oh, that's my brand. That's my purpose of like, I'm actually really good at this and it's something I really love, right? And then, you know, when I, you know, take a brand like Smirnoff and I think about the history that it's had and what it has done over the course of, you know, the years in bringing people together. Oh, the inclusive joy, that brand purpose is true for Smirnoff. And now how do I look at what is happening in the consumer universe and how do I pair those two things together? Right? So,
no,
but yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. I don't know if I want to go off what my friends tell me about myself.
You need good friends.
Yeah. I think it works a little different for girls and guys. Your point is well received. One question we like to ask everyone before is like, you know, you've obviously had a long career. It's taken a lot of twists and turns. You've entered a lot of different industries. What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about like taking a risk and taking a swing, whether that's changing industries, whether that's starting a business, anything like that? Is there anything you would say to someone who's considering doing something big like that?
I would say do your homework, right? Know what you want to do, but I would say the theme for me is go do it. I would say if it's something that entices a visceral reaction in you and you sit and you can see yourself, you know, starting that new business and you feel physically something, go and do it. Because I think your instincts and your intuition are here to guide you. But I would say do it with your eyes open, right? Talk to people, do the research, ask for informational interviews. You know, if it's a new coffee shop that you want to go open, go and, you know, try the 10 best in a 5 kilometer radius of where you'd like to open it up, right? I think talking to people, doing that consumer research, having that consumer centric mindset of sort of making sure that what you have to offer, your service, your product can answer, you know, a gap that's within the industry. I think, yeah, but don't let fear get in your way, because there's always going to be so many reasons why you shouldn't do something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great answer. Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
We do want to give you a chance to plug anything people want to follow you, or is there anything that you want to advertise?
Honestly, is it bad if I say no?
That's
I
totally fine.
think what I am advertising is I want people to show up as their best self, their most authentic self, not be scared to say hello to the stranger on the street, give a smile, ask people if they need help. You know, I don't know. I do believe that we are all going to be better marketers, better finance leads, better lawyers when we just stop and actually practice being good humans again. And I think, you know, the more that we can do that, it is going to lead to better outcomes, more successful business, and honestly, just better lives and a happier world overall. So I know that again, my eternal optimism, but I do, it starts small, and I do think that it starts within each of us and how we show up every single day.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Nadia. It was fantastic to speak with you. It was lots of fun. So really appreciate the time.
Yeah, no, this is really good. And I might hit you up again as we're doing some research on Crown Royal, back to your comment about guys don't talk like this or get the same feedback. That's exactly the insight that we have around young men right now, is they don't talk to each other. So
no loneliness epidemic is.
It's real, right? Yeah.
I mean, Taylor's my good friend. I haven't seen him in years. So
we need to make this happen.
Yes.